This is the sound of the desert wind. A dry, relentless whisper that for millennia was the only voice here. Nothing but sun-scorched earth, rock, and the occasional, stubborn creosote bush. Imagine this. The year is 1930. The Great Depression is sinking its teeth into America. Everywhere, people are hoarding pennies and losing homes. But here, in a desolate, forgotten valley in southern Nevada, a different kind of alchemy is about to begin. Not a search for gold, but a gamble on the ultimate human weakness, the desire for an instant, dazzling escape. This story, the saga of Las Vegas, is not just about brick and mortar, or even slot machines and neon. It is a profound, almost mythological exploration of the American dream, twisted, amplified, and illuminated by the blinding light of ambition and the shadow of unpayable debt. This is a city built on a foundation of IOUs, a glittering monument to the idea that a single, audacious roll of the dice can erase a lifetime of mediocrity. Look at it now. An almost impossible jewel of light, a star that refuses to be extinguished, burning bright in the endless, suffocating darkness of the Mojave Desert. How did this happen? How do you take a landscape that actively tries to kill anything that touches it and transform it into a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, pulsating epicenter of human desire, wealth, and yes, inevitable ruin? The answer is simple, yet revolutionary. You give people permission to be bad, to be reckless, to dream bigger than their bank account. You give them a sanctuary where their sins are monetized, where their failures are just another round of free drinks, and where the promise of becoming a sudden millionaire is always on the next spin. But before the spectacular, shimmering strip we know today, there was the concrete. The Hoover Dam. A colossal undertaking that brought not just water and power to the region, but thousands of restless, hopeful, and mostly male workers looking for a good time after a backbreaking shift. This was the initial spark. These workers, the men who tamed the Colorado River, needed vices. They needed a release valve. And where there is demand, supply will follow, especially when the supply involves cards, liquor, and a moral compass set to off. This is the genesis of Fremont Street, the original Glitter Gulch, a cluster of rudimentary casinos and bars that served as the rough-and-tumble, dust-covered cradle of what would become a global phenomenon. Crucially, in 1931, Nevada legalized gambling to raise tax revenue and stimulate the Depression-era economy. This wasn't a philosophical move, it was a desperate, pragmatic stroke of a legislative pen. But what that pen stroke did was lay the legal, wide-open groundwork for an entirely new kind of American empire. An empire where the house always wins, but where the fantasy of victory is so powerful, so intoxicating, that millions continue to queue up, dollar bills in hand year after year. The early pioneers were not sleek corporate titans. They were characters. Gritty, resourceful, and often carrying a less-than-clean track record from back east. They saw opportunity where others saw only sand. They brought the money, the muscle, and the mindset. They understood that the true genius of the enterprise wasn't the odds on the roulette wheel, but the psychology of the player. They built an environment where time ceased to exist, where the outside world faded to a distant, irrelevant hum, and where the only thing that mattered was the fleeting, electrifying moment of the wager. This is the stage. A barren desert. The actors are the dreamers, the schemers, the desperate, and the incredibly ambitious. They are about to transform a patch of wasteland into the most financially aggressive, visually stunning, and morally ambiguous city the world has ever known. It is the story of how debt, not wealth, became the fundamental building block of the ultimate playground. It is the story of Las Vegas, the city built on debt and dreams. And to understand how an oasis of excess could bloom from nothing, we first have to meet the men who planted the very first, very questionable seeds, and the powerful, unseen forces that watered them with cash and ambition. They weren't just building hotels. They were building a legend, one that was whispered about in smoky backrooms and financed by a very specific, very ruthless kind of loan. The stage is set for the rise of the true architects of the Strip, the figures whose names became synonymous with glamour and danger, the ones who truly knew how to make the impossible real, using borrowed money and relentless audacity. Their story, the story of how they took the first steps from a dusty roadhouse to a neon kingdom, is where the real drama begins. It's a transition from black and white austerity to explosive, electric color. The desert is waiting for its first, dazzling light. The first sparks were lit by necessity and loose morals in the nascent town springing up near the dam. But the structure, the true, enduring architecture of excess, required a different kind of capital and a different kind of discipline. This is where the whispers of organized crime move from the backrooms of Chicago and New York into the sun-baked planning rooms of the desert. Forget the romanticized image of the tuxedo gentleman. The initial financiers of true Las Vegas excess were ruthless businessmen who understood leverage better than any Wall Street analyst. They saw not just a place for a quick buck, but a perfect logistical opportunity. A place far from federal oversight, centrally located to service the booming West Coast, and fueled by cash transactions that left few paper trails. They brought the infrastructure of illicit wealth, the systems for moving money, and most importantly, the chilling, unspoken guarantee that competition would be swiftly and permanently eliminated. This was the crucial pivot, the transition from small-time, dusty gambling dens to a genuine, capital-intensive industry. The arrival of figures like Bugsy Siegel wasn't just a story of tough guys moving west. It was a massive infusion of offshore capital, money that could not be traced back to its origins, and an unmatched vision for vertical integration. Siegel didn't just want a casino, he wanted a destination. He looked at the dusty collection of existing saloons and saw the Sahara. He saw the potential for glamour, for true, theatrical entertainment that went beyond the clinking of chips. He envisioned the Flamingo, a glittering oasis where the high rollers, the celebrities, and the powerful could mingle, spend freely, and, critically, lose staggering sums of money in an atmosphere of manufactured luxury. This move from Fremont Street to what would become the Strip, a road actually designated US Route 91, was an assertion of dominance. It was the powerful declaration that this new Vegas would operate on a different scale, one where debt was not just taken on, but encouraged as the primary engine of growth. The initial financing for these monumental projects often involved the very mechanism they were trying to escape: credit, or more accurately, loans from the syndicate that controlled the flow of dirty money. They were building empires with money that, legally, didn't exist. The concept was brilliant in its audacity: use illicit profits to build publicly visible, legitimate-seeming enterprises, thereby laundering both the money and their reputation simultaneously. This introduced the second, vital pillar of the Vegas mythology: entertainment. A casino can draw a crowd, but only a spectacle can keep them there, keep them spending, and keep them detached from reality long enough to forget how much they've actually lost. Enter the Rat Pack. Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr. These were not mere performers. They were cultural icons, the ultimate proof that Vegas was the new center of American cool, a place where celebrity and risk-taking were inseparable. When Sinatra sang, when he held court, the perception shifted. It wasn't just a gambling den anymore. It was a stage where the American elite came to play and be seen. The synergy was perfect. The mob provided the capital and the security. The entertainers provided the irresistible allure, and the vast, thirsty American public provided the credit card debt and the dream. The visual contrast during this era is crucial. Black and white photographs of dusty construction sites juxtaposed with glossy, full-color advertisements promising Egyptian themes, Roman gods, and Parisian flair just a few miles away. It was a conscious, calculated fabrication of reality. They sold an illusion of effortless wealth, knowing that the foundation of that illusion was debt the average patron wouldn't even realize they were incurring until the markers came due, often mediated by men with very persuasive arguments. The lights went up not because of civic pride, but because the darkness of the desert made the neon seem brighter, more real, more possible. And this possibility, this intoxicating what-if dangling just above the poker table, was the most valuable commodity the city ever traded in. It convinced the average person that their current financial reality was temporary, a minor inconvenience before their inevitable Vegas breakthrough. But that breakthrough was always conditional. Conditional on one more hand, one more drink, one more night where the rules of ordinary life were suspended, and the only law was the house's ever-increasing appetite. The stage was set for the mega-resorts, the architectural marvels that would soon scrape the sky, but first, the mob had to secure their kingdom, creating the very first blueprints for the world's greatest and most expensive magic trick. The transformation from frontier town to sophisticated, mob-backed playground was complete. The desert was officially domesticated, but only on man's own, highly leveraged terms. The illusion was perfect, but the ticking clock of repayment was always present, humming beneath the bass line of the lounge music. The gilded age of the Rat Pack and unchecked mob influence could not last forever. The very glamour and cash flow that made Las Vegas so successful also attracted the relentless gaze of the federal government. By the late 1960s and into the 1970s, the pressure of organized crime's deep entanglement with the casinos became too great. The whispers of skimming, siphoning cash directly off the top before it could be taxed, became too loud, and the IRS and FBI began closing in. This marks the third, transformative phase of Las Vegas, the attempt to sanitize sin. It was an era defined by a need for legitimacy, a drive to replace the shadowy figures of the syndicate with the clean-cut faces of corporate America. But who had the kind of disposable cash required to buy out these massive, glittering properties? The answer arrived not in a sleek limousine, but in a private jet, Howard Hughes. Hughes, the eccentric billionaire, industrialist, and filmmaker, swooped into Vegas in 1966 and, famously, never left his penthouse suite at the Desert Inn. He began buying hotels: the Desert Inn, the Sands, the Frontier, the Silver Slipper, and others, in rapid succession. Hughes, for all his peculiarities, represented the ultimate laundry machine for the city's image. He was legitimate money, old money, and his purchases signaled to the world and to the regulators in Washington that Las Vegas was now open for respectable business. This was not a change in product, the gambling, the drinking, the escape, but a fundamental change in ownership structure. Hughes's takeover began the crucial process of corporate legitimization, shifting the control of the casinos from a handful of shadowy figures to major corporations, often publicly traded on stock exchanges. This change was vital because it meant the flow of debt, the lifeblood of Vegas, could now come from banks, from institutional investors, and from the public stock market, rather than just the coffers of the mob. The debt became democratized. This new corporate era promised stability and unlimited growth, but it introduced a new, equally dangerous element: financial cycles. When the mob ran the city, they operated on perpetual cash flow, regardless of external crises. When corporations took over, they became vulnerable to the same market forces that govern any publicly held company. The debt they incurred to purchase and expand these colossal resorts was immense, leading to the first major systemic crisis. The 1980s saw a brutal recession coupled with intense competition from newly legalized gambling in places like Atlantic City. Suddenly, the debt that fueled the expansion became a crushing liability. Massive hotels like the Dunes, the Landmark, and eventually the Sands started to flounder under the weight of staggering interest payments and declining visitation. Bankruptcies were no longer a hidden secret, they were front-page news. This period proved that Las Vegas, the illusion of limitless wealth, was actually grounded in the same fragile financial soil as the rest of America. The dreams were still being sold, but the credit lines were tightening. The response to this crisis, however, was pure Vegas audacity. If people were hesitant to spend, the city decided to make the spectacle even bigger, even more inescapable. The late 1980s and early 1990s ushered in the age of the mega-resort, led by visionaries like Steve Wynn. These were not just hotels with casinos, they were self-contained, themed worlds. The Mirage, which opened in 1989, wasn't just a casino, it had volcanoes, white tigers, and tropical environments. It cost over $630 million, a then unthinkable sum, and was entirely financed by junk bonds, high-risk, high-yield debt instruments. This was debt taken to an extreme, a massive gamble on the future appeal of spectacle. The Mirage's success reset the global standard, showing that if you build the fantasy big enough, people will come and they will lose money. But the mega-resort era only amplified the reliance on debt. The construction costs soared, from hundreds of millions to billions of dollars for properties like Bellagio, Venetian, and Paris. Every new hotel was an escalation, a bigger wager on the psychology of the visitor. The unspoken agreement remained. The city promises you the illusion of a lifetime, and you pay for it with your own leveraged dreams. The corporate cleanup had simply replaced criminal risk with financial risk. The foundation was no longer sand, but concrete poured over massive, institutional debt, making the next potential crisis, the one that always follows a borrowing spree, even more catastrophic when the ultimate collapse finally arrived, threatening to swallow not just a single resort, but the entire, glittering skyline. The question now was not if the debt bubble would burst, but how many billions it would take down with it when it finally did. The spectacle was breathtaking, but the financial architecture was teetering. By the turn of the millennium, Las Vegas had completed its physical transformation from a desert outpost to an international architectural marvel, but its true genius remained psychological. It was no longer selling gambling. It was selling an experience so immersive, so detached from the mundane realities of life, that visitors willingly suspended their financial caution the moment they crossed the county line. This is the heart of the Vegas contract. The city offers a temporary, total inversion of reality, a place where, for 3 days, you can live like a millionaire, even if the bill for that illusion arrives later. The theme, whether it was Roman luxury at Caesar's palace, Venetian romance, or Parisian elegance, was a carefully constructed fantasy barrier designed to break down the inhibitions of the visitor. Everything from the lack of clocks and windows on the casino floor to the carefully calibrated oxygen levels and the constant, subtle noise of slot machines is engineered to manipulate the player's perception of time, reality, and risk. The casino floor itself is the ultimate stage for the American dream's most intoxicating lie, the lie of instantaneous transformation. Everywhere you look, you see visual cues that reinforce the idea of sudden, massive wealth. Gold accents, marble floors, fountains, and high ceilings, all designed to make you feel that you are standing in a place where winning is not just possible, but the natural order of things. The city sells the feeling of being wealthy, the sensation of being surrounded by endless possibility. This emotional engineering is the true reason for Vegas's profitability. It convinces a vast, predominantly middle-class audience that the financial ladder can be climbed in a single, exhilarating leap. This illusion is fundamentally linked to the concept of debt, because the debt itself, the marker signed in the casino, the credit card swiped at the luxury boutique, is the ticket to temporary citizenship in the city of the super-rich. It is the cost of buying into the fantasy. The revenue streams shifted dramatically in this new era. While gambling remained the core, the mega-resorts realized they could leverage the experience to make exponentially more money. High-end dining, exclusive nightclubs, lavish showrooms, and designer shopping became not just ancillary services, but profit centers designed to extract money from visitors who weren't necessarily high-rolling gamblers. They called it the non-gaming revenue segment, and it represented the final sophistication of the Vegas business model. You come for the gamble, but you spend your actual fortune on everything around the gamble. The $5,000 bottle of champagne, the $400 meal, the spa treatment, these are the guaranteed wins for the house, all paid for with money the visitor often intends to pay back with their next paycheck, or perhaps their next loan. The high roller suites, often comped, given free, to the biggest players, are the ultimate expression of this leveraged fantasy. They are palatial, decadent spaces designed to make the high roller feel like an absolute king, ensuring they feel emotionally indebted and comfortable dropping millions on the tables. The psychology of the player is the real machine running the strip. Studies have shown that the vast majority of visitors are not seeking to make a profit. They are seeking a story. They are seeking the excitement, the temporary feeling of rebellion against their 9-to-5 existence. They are purchasing the memory of that one time in Vegas. This is why the city invests billions in spectacle. The dancing fountains, the acrobatic shows, the celebrity chefs. These are all distractions, meticulously planned elements to keep the visitor in a state of elevated excitement, a place where rational financial decision-making is conveniently suppressed. The whole city is a perfectly calibrated financial siphon, drawing money from millions of small wagers and extravagant purchases, all predicated on the central, glorious fiction that here, in the middle of the desert, your luck is about to change. The city is a masterful mirror, reflecting back the most powerful, often destructive, desire in the American psyche, the desire to shortcut the slow, painful accumulation of wealth and seize the glittering prize now. And as the money flowed in faster than ever before, fueled by a pre-2008 economy high on cheap credit, the city prepared for its greatest, most financially reckless expansion yet, setting the stage for the inevitable fall. The next chapter of this story involves the largest wave of debt the city had ever seen, the last, intoxicating hurrah before the economic reality of the world outside the bright lights finally crashed through the velvet ropes. The momentum built through the 1990s and early 2000s, driven by spectacle and corporate confidence, led to an unprecedented period of reckless borrowing. This was the final, breathtaking act of audacity before the entire financial system buckled. Las Vegas, the city that normalized debt, became a hyper-accelerated microcosm of the global economy's most dangerous trend, excessive leverage. The message was clear. If a $1 billion casino worked, a $4 billion integrated resort would work 4 times better. This era gave us City Center, the Venetian's mammoth expansion, Wynn Resorts, and the Cosmopolitan, projects so vast, so expensive, that they required borrowing staggering sums, often through complex financial instruments that obscured the true risk. This construction boom was not funded by profit, it was funded by pure debt, a towering mountain of bonds, bank loans, and credit default swaps, all wrapped up in the shimmering promise of perpetual growth. The city was operating on an assumption, a delusion, that the economic party would never end, that the middle-class American credit card would never max out, and that money would always flow into the desert. This is the key detail. The interest payments alone on these colossal debts required not just high occupancy, but a constant, increasing revenue stream. A single week of low visitation, a slight dip in consumer confidence, or a rise in interest rates could instantly turn a project into a financial black hole. Yet, the developers, the banks, and the investors all participated in this collective frenzy, blinded by the city's flawless track record of recovery and its seemingly limitless appeal. The average development cost for a major strip resort soared past $2 billion, forcing corporations to use every available asset as collateral. They mortgaged the future against the fantasy. The ultimate symbol of this recklessness was the city center development, a multi-billion-dollar, hyper-modern vertical metropolis that redefined the Strip's skyline. It was audacious, brilliant, and almost entirely funded by a mountain of highly leveraged, easily available credit that suddenly, violently evaporated. When the global financial crisis of 2008 hit, Las Vegas didn't just feel a pinch, it experienced an extinction-level event. The source of its oxygen, the middle-class American consumer with accessible credit and the willingness to travel, was suddenly gone. Banks stopped lending. Construction projects froze mid-air. The tourism numbers plummeted. The consequences were immediate and visible. Massive projects were halted, leaving concrete shells as towering monuments to over-leveraged dreams. Entire resort companies were forced into bankruptcy protection, with billions of dollars in debt erased or restructured. Properties like the Fontainebleau stood unfinished, a stark, gray ghost on the Strip, perfectly illustrating the catastrophic consequences of building on credit that vanishes overnight. The ghost of 2008 still haunts the city. It was the moment the true fragility of the illusion was exposed. For the first time, Las Vegas was forced to admit that it was not immune to the laws of finance. The spectacular lights could not stop a global credit crunch. The crisis revealed that the city's true foundation wasn't entertainment, but its ability to sustain an impossible level of debt. The financial crash was the desert wind returning with a vengeance, blowing away the veneer of endless prosperity and revealing the raw, ugly numbers beneath. It was a crisis of confidence, not just in the casino product, but in the entire American financial edifice that had propped up the city for decades. The recovery would be slow, painful, and fundamentally change the relationship between Las Vegas, its lenders, and the ultimate patron, the debt-carrying American public. The city survived, not by defying the odds, but by forcing its creditors to swallow billions in losses, confirming its status as the ultimate city built on borrowed time and unreturned principle. The narrative of the ultimate comeback was only just beginning, forged in the ashes of the largest collective financial failure the city had ever faced. The crushing debt crisis of 2008 was a forced intervention, a moment when Las Vegas was stripped bare and compelled to adapt or collapse entirely. The massive restructuring that followed, bankruptcies, loan write-downs, and ownership changes, didn't eliminate the city's reliance on debt, but it fundamentally altered how that debt was managed and who was paying it. The corporate survivors, armed with billions of dollars in forgiven loans, realized a dangerous truth: relying solely on the fleeting, discretionary income of the middle-class tourist was a fatal vulnerability. The city had to pivot, creating new, reliable, year-round revenue streams that were immune to regional economic swings. This shift was the beginning of Las Vegas's evolution from a purely gambling destination into a diversified entertainment and convention hub. The biggest change was the aggressive pursuit of the convention and trade show market. This required building not just more hotel rooms, but massive, state-of-the-art convention centers attached to the mega-resorts. Conventions are financial anchors. They book thousands of rooms months in advance, filling the city during traditionally slow periods and providing a stable, predictable base of non-gaming revenue. These visitors are essentially mandated spenders. Their companies pay for the hotel, the meals, and the plane tickets, freeing up the visitors' personal cash for the casino floor and the high-end restaurants. This pivot was a strategic genius move that injected stability into the volatile financial model, transforming the city's economic heartbeat from a chaotic, unpredictable rhythm into a steady, reliable pulse. Simultaneously, Las Vegas strategically embraced professional sports, a final, ultimate validation of its legitimacy. The arrival of the NHL's Golden Knights and the NFL's Raiders, along with the construction of state-of-the-art arenas and stadiums, once again financed through massive public and private debt, was not just about fan excitement. It was a calculated economic maneuver. Sports teams bring guaranteed, year-round visitation, media exposure, and a new demographic of high disposable income fans who might stay for the game but will certainly gamble and dine before or after. The city used debt to buy the ultimate symbol of American mainstream acceptance: a team. But the most potent and least visible change was the shift in focus for the gambling core itself, the reliance on the global high roller. With domestic credit tightened, the city turned its attention to the ultra-wealthy international players, particularly from Asia, who play on a scale that dwarfs the average American tourist. These whales don't pay with credit cards. They often play with markers guaranteed by international banks or with vast sums transferred from overseas accounts. Their losses are so massive that they can single-handedly make or break a casino's quarterly earnings. To cater to them, the resorts created ultra-exclusive, discreet, and mind-bogglingly luxurious sky villas and high-limit baccarat rooms, essentially creating a city within a city dedicated to the highest forms of risk-taking. This new breed of gambler represents the ultimate concentration of wealth, replacing the collective debt of the American middle class with the isolated, massive wagers of a global elite. The financial narrative remains the same. The city still operates on debt and illusion, but the source of the funding and the type of customer it caters to has been refined. The debt incurred is now less about building new castles and more about maintaining and diversifying the kingdom. Las Vegas learned its lesson. It can't stop the inevitable next crash, but it can build multiple revenue buffers, conventions, sports, and international high rollers to cushion the blow. The lights are back on, brighter than ever, but they are powered by a complex, globalized financial engine, a testament to the city's ruthless adaptability. It is a more mature, strategically diversified kind of sin, where the illusion of limitless wealth is now marketed not just to the dreamer, but to the corporate planner and the global plutocrat. The only thing that hasn't changed is the ultimate transaction. The city trades spectacle and escape for your money, and it will always find a way to make sure the debt gets paid. We stand now at the pinnacle of this impossible city, a landscape carved from the desert by nothing more than audacious vision and relentless credit. Las Vegas in the 2020s is a testament to resilience, a city that survived the mob, shrugged off 2 major recessions, and restructured billions in debt. But the story is not truly about survival, it's about reflection. Las Vegas is not merely a destination. It is the perfect, dazzling, and brutally honest mirror of the American experience, taking the core tenets of the American dream: instant opportunity, self-reinvention, and the worship of wealth, and distilling them into their purest, most intoxicating form. The city thrives because it speaks directly to a universal cultural belief that hard work is overrated and that fortune can be seized in a single, glorious moment of luck. This final, modern chapter of Las Vegas is the ultimate conclusion of the city's founding principle: debt is the engine of desire. Every light, every fountain, every high-rise hotel room is amortized debt. The consumer debt carried by millions of visitors is the fuel. The corporate debt held by the resort giants is the chassis. The city has become so sophisticated that the average visitor no longer sees the mechanism. They only see the result: an endless 24-hour performance of wealth. Yet, lurking beneath the flawless service and the silk-lined walls is the constant, cold, hard truth of the ledger. For every high roller who wins $1 million, there are tens of thousands of ordinary people who leave the desert poorer than when they arrived, their credit card balances swollen with the cost of a temporary illusion. The city ensures that the losses are distributed widely, making the entire enterprise sustainable. Consider the symbolism of the mega-resorts today. They are not merely hotels, they are hyper-realities, more Roman than Rome, more Venetian than Venice. This is the final layer of the illusion, the promise that you don't need to travel the world or spend a lifetime saving to experience opulence. You just need to walk across the casino floor. This concentrated, instantaneous access to fantasy is precisely what makes the city's financial model so durable. It satisfies the need for spectacle and escape in a highly efficient, highly monetized way. The recent rise of non-fungible assets and digital gambling, coupled with the city's embrace of next-generation technology, suggests that the physical city built on desert sand is now preparing to colonize the digital realm, expanding its reliance on the next form of speculative debt and ephemeral value. The story of Las Vegas is a profound cultural statement. It reveals our collective appetite for risk, our fascination with sin, and our deep-seated hope for a financial miracle. When you look at the city, you are not looking at a place designed for permanence. You are looking at a place designed for extravagance. It is a temporary shrine to excess, built on borrowed time and borrowed money, always one economic crash away from ruin, yet always finding a way to rebuild, refinance, and resell the dream. The city's greatest magic trick is that, despite all the evidence, it still convinces millions of people every year that they will be the exception to the rule. That they will be the one who finally, gloriously, breaks the bank. And so, Las Vegas endures, not as a monument to stability, but as a monument to audacity. It remains the quintessential American story, a grand, improbable experiment in capitalism built on the shifting sands of debt and powered by the unshakable certainty of human dreams. It is the gold standard of financial leverage and psychological engineering. It proves that if you manufacture a dream brilliant enough, people will pay any price and sign any marker to experience it. Las Vegas is not a city. It is a mirror of America, and it shows us exactly what we value and what we are willing to lose. The lights will continue to burn, the debt will continue to accrue, and the endless pursuit of the impossible win will forever echo across the Mojave Desert. The gamble continues.